I like drawing characters, I like painting backgrounds. Hi there, I'm Deanna. I'm a designer in the animation industry. My recent illustration series is called Zodiac Pups. I redesigned the star signs as different dog breeds. So I was thinking today I would show you some of my time lapses and talk through my process. So as we go through, I'm going to point out all of the different thoughts that I had, the symbols, the themes, all of the meaning that I tried to put into each drawing. Potentially, this could be a series. I'm thinking maybe it could be called like Time Lapse and Chat. Did I name it that? Let's start with Capricorn, the German Shepherd. The very first thing I do in all of my drawings is a really messy sketch. I don't often film myself when I'm sketching because I really need room to make mistakes. I really need to be thinking about all of the questions that I'm trying to answer in this drawing. Where is the flow? Now for Capricorn, the shape of this constellation is basically a triangle. And German Shepherds are also basically a triangle. I'm trying to put triangles into everything. He's got triangle body, his neck is kind of a triangle, it's got triangle face, his ears, triangles everywhere. You have a simple shape and you just repeat it as often as you can and it makes the whole thing look quite unified. I love that technique. When I'm drawing line art, I really like using the natural flow of my arm and the natural shapes that my hand draws, especially when the line that I'm drawing is an S curve. I love being surprised by exactly where the weight is hitting on each side of the line. I don't want a rigid line, I want a nice smooth flowy line. So after drawing in the line art, I start filling in with a base color. And I got some questions that were like, why are you filling it in green and then painting over it with the dog's natural colors? And the reason I did this is because I'm using texture brushes over the top. So some of the green does show through. It might not be so obvious when you're looking at it on Instagram or on TikTok, but if you get a print of this drawing, you would see some of that green texture coming through and it just makes it look more natural, hand-drawn, a little bit watercolory, maybe pastel-y. And I think that's really beautiful. I allocated a different color for each drawing based on what element the star sign is. So Capricorn is an earth sign, so it gets a green base color. And then over that green base color, I use clipping masks to put all of the other filled in colors into that silhouette so that I don't have to keep caring about where the edge of the character is. I draw the silhouette one time and then I'm just clipping over the top. It's very efficient. Every single color is on a different layer. And this makes it really easy to go back later and change the colors. So for example, this dog has a green base and then over the top I've clipped this sort of russet brown color and then the purple markings. And if I decide the russet brown color, I want to adjust it just a little bit. It's very easy because it's completely separate. So I just lock the transparency and paint over it. You don't want to have to redo everything. After I paint in the character's markings, I start painting in the shadows. Some people were wondering, why do I use purple for shadows? Basically, the reason is that it's like blue, but it's warm. And I like it. Another reason is that for the dog's markings, I've chosen to use purple instead of a literal black pigment. So purple shading ties it all together because it's from the same palette as the purple markings. Now, this of course begs the next question, why did I use purple for the markings instead of literal black pigment? One reason is that the line art is black, so I wanted it to show up. Another reason is that I wanted to make sure that the shadows would still show up. I needed room to get even darker when things were in shadow. I suppose I could have used a really dark brown, and that would have been a perfectly awesome option. I feel like the black that's on dogs is a really cool color though, and so I wanted a color that was more cool than the rest of the palette, but still warmer than blue. So I landed on purple. Here on Capricorn, I really love the shadow that cuts across the chest. I love a sudden angle change in my drawings. Beautiful. After shading, I like to add a rim light along the back of each dog. It's a very stylized, illustrative choice. They look so cool. The goal of the rim light is to highlight and accentuate the character's silhouette a little bit more. And I always prefer to put rim lights on the back of characters so that they're not interrupting the face silhouette. And because these dogs are star signs, I wanted to make sure there was a lot of light in the scene, but it's still a relatively simple and flat illustration style. So in addition to the rim light, I've also got blue glow around the silhouette, so it just kind of glows up the scene a little bit. So the last step is drawing in the stars of the constellation and putting in the constellation lines itself, and it's probably about time to move on to the next dog. By the way, if you're enjoying this, please do subscribe because I'm going to keep making more. It's Gemini. So Gemini is all about the twins, and there's a real sense of duality in the star sign. So at first, I thought I was going to draw these two dogs quite close together. When I'm drawing overlapping characters, I like to draw the entirety of each character anyway, so that I know how things are lining up and that it all makes sense. And as I was working on this one, I realized actually I wanted to move them a bit further apart. The shape of this constellation is two bars at a diagonal angle. I've decided to replicate that with this rope chew toy, like a dog version of this diagonal line. Pomeranians are obviously super cute, so I was going for really round shapes, very curly tail, everything very plush and plump. And Pomeranians are also really small, so one of the ways that I did that was by making their eyes really big. When you make the proportions bigger, it makes the character overall look smaller. Bigger eyes, bigger ears, bigger tail. But you'll also note that they have the smallest feet in the entire drawing series. So I love these big puffy, fluffy bodies and then those little tiny feet. That's so cute. Contrast in design is really important. When I'm drawing fluffy hair throughout this series, the first thing I do is I draw the silhouette of the overall form and then I cut into it with these little V shapes. Like hair could be really complicated, but I love approaching it from silhouette first and then cutting into those details. Gemini is an air sign, so for this base color, it wasn't obvious what to choose. Water is blue, earth is green, and fire is orange. For the air signs, I chose to use purple because it's kind of a lavender purple, and also, you know, I've got purple throughout the whole series. I wanted to really represent Gemini's duality in this drawing, but I didn't want it to be like good versus evil. Rather, two sides of the same coin, but both really important. So I've got one dog that's looking up, I've got the other dog that's looking down. One dog is this tan color and a dark color, and the other is a tan color and a light color, and even where I've put the tan is opposite on each dog. Even the rope that they're playing with is two strings intertwined. It's dark and light, but they're bound together in the same way that the two sides of Gemini are bound together. You need both sides to make Gemini. One really specific thing I like about Gemini is the way that I've done the shading on the tails. You could paint the shadow on every side of the curve, like the inside of the curve and then the outside of the curly. Am I explaining this right? Basically what I've done is essentially one circle of shading over the tail. As it's curving around, the surface changes, it just drops. If I was shading every surface of the tail, it might get quite complicated. That's obviously not the style that I'm going for. I'm also using shading to reinforce the planes of the face. The shading really follows where the eyebrows are, and that's because the eyebrows are really on the corner of the forehead, and then you've got the eyelid section underneath. As the eyebrow comes down, that plane drops down, and as the eyebrow lifts, that plane lifts. And so I wanted to reinforce those eyebrow positions with the face shading. Really, this drawing is all about expression. Rim light is such a good opportunity to highlight the different elements in the drawing. So for this one, I've got rim light not only on the dogs, but on the rope itself. I've also got cast shadow on the ground. The base color, the rim light, the ground shadow, and the stars are all purple, and then everything matches. This drawing did take a little bit longer because it is two dogs. It's essentially two drawings, but I mean, it's Gemini. I had to do it. It's the twins. Okay, no, if you haven't seen the series, you need to get ready because this next one, I don't want to pick favorites, but I think it might be my favorite. It's Pisces. Pisces is known for being very emotionally intuitive and sensitive, so I drew them as an Italian greyhound in a little jumper. The shape of the Pisces constellation is basically like a V on the side, and Italian greyhounds kind of push back when they sit down. Throughout this drawing, I'm really trying to focus on that stretch from the foot all the way up through the head. Now, there are many theories of character design, and one of them is the idea of simple against complex. We mostly see this in silhouette. It's the idea that on one side of the shape, the details in the silhouette will be very simple and very clean, and then on the other side, you'll have more information. The lines might go in and out. So in this drawing, my first thought was that because the dog is stretching back, I wanted that line of the stretch on the front of the dog to be very simple, but it wasn't really making sense, and I couldn't figure out why for a little while. But then I realized that because that leg is lifted up, that's interrupting the simplicity, and actually the simplicity should be on the other side of the dog, on the back. So you'll notice that I moved the neck cowl forward, and that makes the back more simple, whereas the front has more of that detail going on. And it also reinforces the energy of the pose. You know, when you move, you drag things behind you, and it's almost like this dog is leaning back quite suddenly and the jumper has just gone forward, and that works out really nicely. I'm really pleased with the expression on this dog. I've really been enjoying pushing eyes around really far. The eyes are so extremely to the side, which I enjoy, even though the eyebrows and the mouth are not doing very extreme shapes. Just the positioning of the eye, very simple. This dog is worried, and you know, he's supposed to be sensitive, so I think that suits. When a character is just one color like this dog is, I like to darken the points a bit more clear, like where things are sitting on the form. So I've darkened the ears, I've darkened the nose. I also like to darken the paws and the end of the tail, and it just helps ground the drawing a little bit more rather than having only one solid flat color. Wherever possible, I like to hide a little something from the signs symbol in the drawing. It wasn't super obvious in some of them, but this one is one of the more obvious ones. I put a little fish decoration along the edge of the jumper there. I really want this jumper. I do not have time to start such a big project as a knitted fish jumper, but oh, I would like to. And I could have outlined the knitting stitches of every fish, but I wanted to keep it really simple. So I just did a little bit of a knitting detail, and it matches in with the fish's scales. So it's sort of a subtle indication that it's knitted without doing all of that complicated detail. I also wanted this jumper to look like it was just a little bit big for this dog. This is a small breed, and a big jumper is just so cozy, a comforting thing that I think really suits the character. Now, when I'm drawing in the stars, I like to have them all a little bit different sizes so that there's more variation and interest. Obviously, these drawings are on a white background, and so if I wanted the stars to show up as light, I kind of had to surround them with a slightly darker color. It's not really an intuitive thing to do to add darkness around light, but you can't see light if you don't add darkness. I just love this drawing. If you're curious about why I chose each breed for each star sign, please check out my Zodiac Pups playlist. It has a little short for each of the dogs and each of the star signs, and you can see exactly why I chose each breed. Thanks for watching!